Welcome back to the Free Spirits Podcast, where we dive into the functional and THC beverage industries. We'll be exploring the brand stories and operations that redefine how we relax, connect, and socialize. I'm your host, Lars Miller, here with my co-host, David Gonzalez. But before we jump in, a quick reminder, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and follow us on whatever podcast platform you use. You can find us on all of them, and please rate and review us. It helps us grow. Joining us today is Lisa Hurwitz, president and co-founder of Happi, a low-dose THC beverage brand that's redefining the happy hour experience. Lisa brings a wealth of experience from her time leading marketing efforts at Grassroots Cannabis, where she scaled the company into a multi-state operator before its acquisition by Curaleaf for $830 million. Since launching Happi in 2021, Lisa has been at the forefront of innovation in cannabis beverages, blending cannabinoids like THC, CBG, CBN, and THCV with functional ingredients such as lion's mane to craft drinks that are wellness focused as they are social. Welcome, Lisa.
That was a mouthful. Thank you, Lars. You did that perfectly. I know it's hard to talk functional beverages and ingredients, so thank you for that intro. I'm excited to be here with you and David.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for joining us. So, Lisa, last time you and I got a chance to connect, you were calling in from somewhere I imagine not a lot of our listeners have ever been before. Where was that?
If I had to guess, David, I would guess Nicaragua, Central America?
That's absolutely correct. So, Lisa, my first question for you is, as somebody who is leading this brand, what is it like to work from a place like Nicaragua, but also have this burgeoning new brand in this U.S. marketplace?
That's an awesome question. And actually, I'm probably giving this away a little early, but I am going to start a Substack newsletter to be able to sort of write about, and hopefully launching that in January. So more to come for your followers. But to write about both my experience as sort of an expat and my experience running Happi, because they actually were born around the same time. So it's ironic. Today I'm sitting talking to you guys on December 2nd. We left for Nicaragua on December 2020. Kind of in the height of COVID, working remotely, remote school. I think we all remember that time. And the idea was I was trying to get Happi off the ground with my business partner, but also trying to keep my family sane during COVID. And we said, hey, let's move from Chicago to a warm weather place for 3 months. 3 months turned into 6 months. 6 months turned into basically 4 years, sold houses in the US, became really more full-time residents down here. So I'm back in the US quite often. What I would say is this lifestyle down here keeps me really honest, and it keeps me in touch with sort of nature and plants. And it reminds me of like the root of Happi, to be honest with you. I'm always sort of thinking about new flavors. Like right now we're talking our spring, summer, seasonal and tropical flavors. I live in the land of pineapple and watermelon and guava and papaya. And so it provides, David, a lot of inspiration. And what I would say personally is I spent, my whole career in the corporate world on airplanes and traveling a lot. And I like to call this experience like the Happi effect. When I found a lot of joy and happiness in being in nature, being in Nicaragua, learning to surf, being in the ocean, it's when Happi started to get really exciting and be born. It's when it felt like it kind of became alive as a brand, and those two things coincided. It's a lot of fun to be able to gain inspiration being down here and then bring that to consumers and into our processes and ingredients and formulas that we manufacture Happi in the US.
So basically you have immersed yourself in an environment where the flavors are kind of ingrained in a culture, and you can use that experience to help with a product roadmap. That's pretty unorthodox, but impressive nonetheless. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's fun. One of the ones I like to talk about, we drink a lot of passion fruit down here. It's one of my favorite flavors. I don't know if we'll make it into a Happi, but stay tuned, maybe. And it's called Calala in Nicaragua. Passion fruit, for some reason, the Spanish word here is Calala, not maracuya, which is in other places. And I'm always playing with it without the THC, but I'm always playing with different botanicals and different fruit flavors and just trying to really lean into sort of the plant-based nature of what these drinks really are, which I think is the root of what makes them so exciting. Is there's so much you can do with these beverages that has like not yet been tapped. That's what keeps me really excited.
Absolutely.
The tropical flavors are definitely some of my favorite. Passion fruit, dragon fruit, and mangoes, especially down here in Florida. We get a lot of mango tree thieves, if you will. So, leading Happi, you're among some of the few women leading a THC beverage company in the industry that remains pretty male dominated. What has your experience been like, navigating the space as a female leader, and have you seen any positive shifts in the landscape?
I'm really glad you asked that question. I feel like we don't get to talk about sort of the gender differences in this category. And what I'll say is it's disappointing, Lars. I think I feel the same way I did when I left the regulated cannabis market 4 years ago. So when I left Grassroots, I joined forces with some of the most amazing women in the cannabis industry. And we formed a women's group called WINC, Women in Cannabis. And for 4 years, we met monthly. The group still very much in touch. A big group of them are getting together at MJ Biz this week. But I would say more women have fallen out of the cannabis and hemp categories than have come into it over the past 4 years. And I think that's just a testament to, again, lots of other factors, lack of funding, lack of support for senior women in a lot of these, lack of board seats. Even if you look at the MSOs, I think their boards have shrunk in terms of the number of women on those boards. And so it's just, I think it's frustrating from a diverse standpoint. And the other piece to it is I know Happi's consumer base is very, very strongly women consumers, in addition to men, but we tend to really reach women with our flavors and our branding and marketing. And I've seen so many of these hemp beverages, try to reach women. And I think what makes Happi different and special is like by women for women, right? I often think of my peer group and my friends and my family as we're designing beverages and what would I want to drink in this occasion, right? And I think, you see this a lot, but if, you're a high dose stoner man, trying to design for that target audience is harder than it looks, right? So I think there's an authenticity in Happi that makes it feel a bit different. And I think my experience is I'm kind of used to being one of the few, and I like the challenge. I like it. There's a bit of an underdog mentality, and I actually enjoy being in that position. Of course, I wish there were more women around me, and at Happi, 80% of our team is female, 50% of our cap table is female, so we make a big effort. But, I think it's just systemic in the industry right now that there isn't enough funding and there aren't enough female leaders.
Yeah, so you mentioned a few things there around, your branding as well as your team being 80% female led there. So how are you actively shaping the messaging and creating that inclusive environment both internally as well as your consumer facing messaging?
Yeah, I mean, internally, we just have a lot of support overall for the team, but in terms we have a mission, vision, values for Happi that's very inclusive, very much about, we kind of walk the talk, right? And I think that's really important. And my business partner, Joe, who's a man, and I have been very clear about wanting diversity. We believe diversity breeds the best ideas. It breeds the best culture internally. There's a lot of healthy debate amongst our team. We get together at least weekly. We have a Slack channel for our sales team. We communicate a lot and we share a lot of ideas. And I think it's just a very supportive, inclusive environment, which feels inclusive to women and men. We, of course, have many men on our team as well. So that it's really sort of living the values of who we are as a company and believing that, there really is a Happi for any occasion and that we bring happiness. I mean, we deliver happiness. That's really who we are as a business and a brand. And I think in terms of consumers too, we get a lot of feedback, Lars. We get a lot of reviews. We get a lot of people writing in and saying, I had no idea that just cutting alcohol for a month or substituting Happi, for my weekly wine before bed would help. And I think what comes across and what attracts women is it's low calorie, it's all natural, it is functional in nature. So we are not how high can you get as a beverage. We're a microdose beverage. And we were, the three of us were talking about microdose earlier, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's important that this is a drink that's sessionable, that you can have several of them over a period of time. And I also think Happi has aimed to be part of multiple beverage occasions, not just social drinking, not just that wine replacement, but also, could I have a Happi before bed and it helps me sleep? Happi dance, could I drink it during the day and it keeps me feeling kind of focused and upbeat and engaged, right? So our goal is to design products for every drinking occasion and make those products as healthy, as effective, as delicious, and as accessible as possible, right? So I think that really appeals. We seem to be replacing wine more than any other beverage is the feedback we get.
I love that response. And so, Lisa, you guys are doing a ton to help elevate women in the space. At the same time, you're also just leaders yourselves, regardless of whether it's for women or just in general, across the category. Happi does a phenomenal job of pushing the category forward. Testament to your work at the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, as well as all the work you do behind the scenes. And so to me, that's a big testament of who you are and where you came from. And so I know you had a conversation with Lars during the Founder Spotlight a bit, where you talked about your time at Kimberly-Clark. You've talked about your time working for recreational cannabis. As this category evolves and moves forward, what kind of lessons do you think you'll be able to take, or that you've taken already, from both CPG and from adult use cannabis and applying that to hemp? And do you see this marketplace gravitating one direction or the other? Do you see it playing out more like recreational? Do you see it becoming more like CPG? How has your background, your experience kind of helped you find this new niche that skates somewhere down the middle?
It's an awesome question. And by the way, thank you for the kind words. I feel like this is, it's nice to be with you guys and get to talk shop. I think, God, the number of times I wish I had a crystal ball and could look into it and say, this whole category does, right? Regulated cannabis has been a tough road for the past few years. It's just been a challenge with all the setbacks. And I would say your analysis, David, is very astute. I think this category is straight down the middle. It's somewhere between. It's a highly regulated CPG category. I think what is challenging is there is no clear regulatory framework. So we're not fitting in where alcohol and tobacco fit, but we're also not as regulated cannabis. So it's a gray area, and it's holding the industry back. I personally see signals since the election that there is more concern, just from the investor community and the regulators around regulated cannabis than there is hemp beverages. I think there is a clear sense that hemp beverages could be slotted into a regulatory framework that looks more like alcohol. And so I think what's challenging for me from my CPG background is there is no concern about toilet paper. There is no concern about Kleenex or, those things are fairly routine and have been manufactured in the US for a very, very, very long period of time, right? And I think what's tricky is we're already in a highly regulated category because these are, this is THC and we're talking alcohol and there are regulatory bodies in the US. Hemp is squarely sitting in the middle. And I think if I had to, look at the future, I think it's going to move towards alcohol, and I think it's going to move towards, it's much more like a CPG category overall. A dispensary is, kind of a weird retail environment. It's like a whole new, it's like the cannabis industry had to create their own retail stores because of the regulations, right? And it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know, 10 years ago, how many people knew what a dispensary was, right? Nobody. I mean, very few, maybe in some small states. But this, in where hemp is going, there isn't as much change. We're not creating new retail. We're going into Total Wine and Top 10 in Minnesota and Binny's in Chicago. And so while each state is different, and that's where it mimics adult use a little bit, or it's moving more towards adult use, and that each state is putting their own regulations in place, there isn't as much of a drastic change as what away from like traditional retail and traditional distribution and all of the sort of infrastructure and supply chain you see in traditional CPG. Hemp is following that more. Cannabis is a whole different beast because everything has to be obviously grown, manufactured, and sold in the same state. And that just really, cuts off any ability to scale. There is scale in hemp. It's just not quite as open as toilet paper.
Of course. Yeah, I think it's a great call out. I think the two things that came to mind were on the recreational side, you have each market looks, operates, feels different. And you see that same parallel on the hemp side, even though there is interstate commerce. But what stood out to me was that if you look at where the customer actually is and the infrastructure and points of distribution, you're right. It's not where recreational cannabis is. It's at these different types of retailers. And you're right. There probably will be a day where we see the big box retail hop in here. But it's refreshing to see it sold alongside of alcoholic beverages, seeing it at gas stations, convenience stores, etc. It's much more ubiquitous, therefore, out in the open than your traditional cannabis, which has been relegated to these dispensaries. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, from a consumer perspective, just to add on to what you said, dispensary is a very odd experience because you're walking into like a weed store, and if you're if you're not comfortable, that is a challenging retail experience. Like, what is flower? What are vapes? What do I ask for? What's a strain? My backstory is I had a medical card in Illinois and I kind of self-taught myself cannabis in 2017. And that's what really got me into the industry. I had no idea. I got fingerprinted and background check just to get a medical card in Illinois at the time. And it's really intimidating. So I think what's so exciting about the hemp beverage space is if it sits on a shelf right next to your favorite, beer or seltzer or wine, it just feels more like, something you would want to drink. Even if it's the same as what you were selling in a dispensary, that environment and that sort of social proof that it's right next to alcohol, I think is a much easier sell for consumers. So that makes this category really exciting.
100%. I am very much looking forward to the day where I can walk into a Target and see some Happies up on those shelves.
You, Lars.
So Happi positions itself as both a wellness product and a social beverage. You've mentioned, the natural products or ingredients, I should say, and, bringing happiness to the table. So how do you manage the messaging around these somewhat dual purposes? And, do you see any potential conflicts or synergies in appealing to both the wellness-focused customers and those seeking a social drinking experience?
Yeah, I think it's one and the same. I think consumers change their mindset for different drinking occasions. I mean, I'm one, right? Sometimes in the morning, I'm having, like a protein shake or a smoothie or something that's more like workout focused. And then in the evening, I might want, a happy cocktail or to socialize, a mocktail. So I think consumers change their beverage habits throughout the day. And our goal was to own the beverage occasion, right? There's a Happi for every occasion, and we have kind of the ability to be there. So I think, again, that same consumer is very consistent in who she is like throughout the day, and she likes to have a different Happi for different purposes. And so we are seeing, for our consumer, for example, relaxation is the number one reason they drink Happi. Period, full stop. They like it at the end of the day to relax. We're also seeing some insights, which I find this is really fascinating, that a lot of our consumers, and this is okay, I want to make this point, like alcohol is not all bad. If people want to have a glass of wine on the weekend or a cocktail, that's great. We believe that Happi and hemp-derived beverages can help you be a little bit healthier. And what we're seeing is Happi is actually being consumed more during weekdays and replacing the weekday drinking occasion more so than the weekend drinking occasion. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's a kind of a stepping stone. And we're going to see that trend continue where instead of having a glass of wine at dinner, when I'm just home, or instead of watching Netflix and having a nightly glass of wine, I'm now drinking a Happi. But if I want to go out and socialize and go to bars on the weekend with my friends, it's okay to have a glass of wine or a margarita or a Negroni because that's a special celebratory occasion. And once consumers get more familiar with cannabis, the way they're familiar with alcohol, I think those social drinking occasions are going to start to shift. But what we're seeing shift first are the weekday drinking occasions. And I think there's actually more overlap, Lars, in the weekday drinking occasions between sort of wellness and functional and social and that sort of alcohol replacement, I guess I would say. And so that is where Happi's sweet spot is now. And we're really excited to be there because I think that's where we want to be.
I love that you mentioned the weekday replacing the weekday drinking. It's a message that has kind of echoed through some of our previous conversations of it's not that alcohol is the problem, it's that alcohol abuse is the problem. And it's not that these beverages want to take on the entire alcohol industry, but just kind of be there for more mindful experiences for the consumer.
Exactly.
So Lisa, you've mentioned that Happi, you're straddling this functional, this wellness element, and I think that really stands out in the formulations and the ingredients that your team uses. You were the first drink where I saw both CBG and CBN in the same cocktail. There's also obviously THC. We talked about the THCV drink, your newest one, which I am beyond excited to try out. I'm a huge fan of THCV.
You need to give me your address, David, and I'll send you some after this. Yeah, for sure.
I would love to try some. And even lion's mane, which is obviously kind of a tangential ingredient in and of itself. So there's this blend of psychoactive components, therapeutic components, even anotropic effects, if you will. So how did your team come up with these different ingredient profiles? The first drink you're coming out with, it might be, if it's confusing at all for the consumer to see these kind of different cannabinoids all in one drink, if there was some education involved. But how did your team decide to come out with something like this, given that everybody else is, I'll just have 10 milligrams of THC, call it a day, and pat myself on the back? How did you guys decide to switch it up?
It's a great question. And again, I think this is some of my regulated market and CPG experience coming out is I've always seen cannabis not as a one-to-one with alcohol. So just so you guys know, and I've spoken about this, Lars, you and I talked about it. I got into cannabis to actually replace pharmaceuticals. I got into cannabis to help me sleep because I was taking a lot of Ambien. And so I actually personally didn't even have alcohol as sort of the frame of reference. I had more of a wellness, occasion-based sort of mindset around what cannabis could do coming out of the regulated market. And the dispensaries and grassroots owned 70 some plus dispensaries when we sold to Curaleaf, we used to see pain, sleep, anxiety, that's why people were in the dispensaries. They weren't in there to get super, super high, right? And so that sort of health, starting in the medical market and that health mindset actually drove a lot of how we've developed Happi and the formulation. So what we do is we sit and we say, what do we want to feel like? What do we want? How do we want to make ourselves and thus our consumers feel? And it's like with Happi Glow, for example, relaxed. Okay, so you're going to get, how do you find a formulation that's relaxing? What kind of minor cannabinoids, what kind of ratios, what kind of ingredients can contribute to that? We're actually in the process of upgrading our nightcap formulation, which is our sleep one. And we actually surveyed our top nightcap consumers who are all on subscription. And we said, would you guys like to see melatonin in there, which we don't have? Would you like to see L-theanine? Would you like to see something else that's just helpful with sleep? And we get feedback from our consumers. So I think it's a little bit of, it's how would you like to feel? What are the different ingredients, but also the different cannabinoids that we can put in there for that formulation? And then we're willing to say, okay, how can we improve on something? I think Happi Nightcap is one where it does fine, and there's certainly a consumer that loves it, but I think it could be better. We all think it could be better, and so we asked our consumers, what's going to make it better? So that should give you a sense of just, and we like to involve our consumers and we survey them at least twice a year, as a total big survey. And then we, for feedback on ideas and new flavor ideas and things like that. And then and that's how Dance was born. We had a lot of relaxing drinks, but none that were more energizing or uplifting. And we said, okay, THCV, it can be energizing. It can be for focus. It can be an appetite suppressant. It can help with creativity. That got us really excited. So
absolutely,
that's how we think about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask as a follow-up question if you've been able to learn from customers by having these different experiments, meaning there's a lot of people who try to do an energy THC drink or who want to do a nighttime beverage. What kind of responses have you gotten from the market? Is there people who want both? Is it somebody who comes in for a specific reason? They just want sleep. Maybe they want something stronger. That if you put melatonin in a drink with CBN, THC, and the other components in there, that's going to put you on your ass. So is that people coming from a NyQuil type of replacement, or I guess what kind of feedback have you gotten around these different functional effects that your team engineering through beverages?
So far, it's been wildly popular. I mean, our Glow and so just to give you a sense, Happi Dance is our third best-selling product in 4 weeks on direct to consumer. It is our top selling 5 milligram product right now. It has surpassed everything else because I think what we look at too, David, and it's a great question, is effect and how is this drink going to really function? And again, we look at people's days. So this comes from my consumer marketing background to a degree, right? Working with P&G before Kimberly-Clark and really thinking consumer centric. If you take a consumer's beverage journey, it often starts, and I'm so guilty of this, the first thing I do is go get a cup of coffee in the morning. I can't function. You guys are both nodding, and David, I know you have a 9-month-old, so
I do.
You're probably if you're a coffee guy, you're probably rolling out of bed and getting a cup of coffee, right?
A pot of coffee, yep.
And my husband and I fight, who drank more? I didn't get enough today,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you think about all the beverage occasions you have throughout the day, it starts with coffee and it can often end with something before bed. And think about all the different opportunities. And you as a single consumer are consuming different beverages at different times of the day for different need states. And that's how we think about it. I mean, the beauty of cannabis is you can use all these plant-based ingredients and all these minor cannabinoids to elicit different effects. And I think We may be a little early in the market. Sometimes I still think we're a little early, even though we've been doing this for like 2 years now. I think you're going to see more and more companies come out with functional. It's just a little harder to do and it's more expensive because you're extracting minor cannabinoids and they're harder to find and things like that. But I do believe this is what's going to set cannabis apart from both other functional beverages and also from alcohol, because you can put ingredients together to get special effects, which I think through it's the same consumer throughout the day that may want to feel energized in the morning by coffee but relaxed in the evening to go to bed. And I'll tell you, that's me. I mean, I absolutely am drinking my coffee in the morning and I'm having my happy glow right after I get off the phone with you guys, and then having a nightcap and then having a nightcap closer to bed, right? So
yeah, Lisa, when I first heard about THC beverages, my immediate reaction was this is the antithesis to energy drinks and the perfect complement to this radical, because everybody wakes up and has some sort of caffeine, but then everybody has sleep problems at night. And there's not really a yin and yang, so to speak, or something that balances that out. And when these first came out, I was like, oh, perfect. Everyone will just have these before bed. It'll balance out those energy drinks. It'll be the perfect kind of complementary category to grow alongside. But now we're kind of seeing, well, there are parts of the plant that can also be energy-based as well. So you can replace those morning drinks with cannabinoid products and functional products as well, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, and I think there's some brands that are doing things that are often not as talked about, but like you take Off Field, for example, and I don't know those guys, so this is certainly, me giving them a little free marketing, but like it's for running, right? It's for energy. It's a runner's high. It's about, really how do you, a drink and an option for exercising. And I think that's really interesting because I do think if you go back to the core format and you think about all the different drinks we drink throughout the day, Gatorade and sort of, we've been asked a lot about hydration drinks for Happi, and it's not a place we're going to go quite yet, but it's, again, the beverage category overall has grown so much in the past 10, 15, 20 years, just in terms of like what's on the market, what's on the shelf of retail now. If you think about how THC can start to take share in some of those places, it's a massive opportunity.
Also, I love Off Field personally. I'm a big runner myself. I'll also give them a little free marketing as well. So, you mentioned earlier you guys have Happi Dance, which is strictly D2C, and then you have, some wholesale accounts out in the United States as well. So as you're managing the distribution there, and obviously the different states have different requirements, you're having complex supply chains, and those vary state by state. So how have you structured Happi's supply chain operations to remain flexible as well as compliant across all those states? And have you implemented anything creative or innovative from a logistics solution to address those issues?
I mean, in terms of supply chain, again, just keeping our costs as low, our everything as efficient as possible. We have multiple co-packers. So I would say in terms of, co-packing, we're trying to get as close to both our D2C warehouses as well as some of our core markets as possible, because obviously freight, these are the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest costs, both from a D2C perspective, shipping, and then from a, freight, obviously moving pallets on trucks and moving it all around the country to different distributors. So the closer from a proximity standpoint we are in terms of warehousing to either where we're shipping and to direct to consumer or to distributors. So just looking at diversification of our manufacturing, where we're manufacturing, how we're thinking about it. And then we recently did a bunch of testing on our D2C in terms of shipping rates and things like that to really understand where our consumers see the value. Obviously, shipping drinks is more expensive than going out and buying it in your local store, but we've learned that a lot of Happi consumers would like to pay for the convenience, and they also appreciate the idea of a subscription and it's going to land on their door and they get a discount as a result of it. And I think there's something to be said for that. So is it perfect? No, we're always working on it. The more this, I would say, Lars, the more this category matures, the more co-packing options there are, the more freight options there are, the more warehousing options there are, all of the above, and just being more efficient. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. I think alcohol obviously has a model that does this really, really well, and just trying to be more efficient in how we're doing it.
Yeah, the D2C component, whether it be subscription or just a one-off order, is definitely something that me as a consumer, I value highly. I hate going to stores. Literally every time my wife and I go to a store and we're standing there waiting in line to pay, I'm like, this is why I shop online. I cannot stand waiting 5 minutes to just pay for my products. So I definitely understand that as well.
It's an interesting thing you mentioned. So Lisa, you've talked about the distribution, the wholesale model. You've talked about D2C as well. I would say there's a third model that I was surprised but delighted to see, which was the Wanderous Marketplace. And so I was wondering as well, and they're also, I think Boyson just launched a marketplace too. What is it like for a beverage brand to be sold in a marketplace as opposed to direct to that consumer or at a retail spot? Is there some net benefit of being placed amongst these other products online? Is every sale kind of created equal for your team? How does being in a place like Wanderous, is that sale still something that you guys want to push? Is this more of a discovery engine? And how did that all come to be? That's all. It's a lot of really powerful brands that all just came together and partnered up. I'm fascinated to hear about the story.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. We get a lot of questions about Wana, and we're in the process of sort of relaunching our gummy offering with them on the Happi site, so the happyhour.com. Awesome. Yeah, which is exciting. I think the challenge for marketplaces, and we're about to be on another one that's coming out first quarter of next year, is they have to drive as much traffic,
right,
and get as much visibility as a single brand site, right? So I think for us, to be honest with you, we started Happi from a D2C perspective. It'll be almost 2 years in February. So we were able to build a following, and we have a really good product, right? So people drink it, they tell friends more, and we've been, we have 65,000, almost 70,000 consumers in our database. And so for us, it's actually now a lot easier to run our own D2C, and we know what works, and we can message we can email, and our CRM is really strong, and we're about to launch SMS, and we're about to launch some other things.
Awesome.
I think the challenge for these marketplaces is it's not Amazon, right?
Right.
Which I know some of our competitors are on and doing really well, but you can't sell infused beverages on Amazon. So it's not a place consumers go anyway. And so the challenge is it's expensive to drive media, and I don't think they have as much traffic as they would like. I'd love to see that model work because I think it could be a great, to your point, third channel. So we're very supportive of Wana's strategy and what they're doing. I think it's a expensive model until you get enough eyeballs on those sites or repeat traffic on those sites. As far as our partnership with Wana, I adore, and Nancy Whiteman is a close friend of mine. She founded Wana. She is recently sort of retired and on the board, but we had always wanted to do two strong female brands together. So back to your conversation about women, I see Nancy as the leader certainly in the edible space, but she's one of the top and most inspirational women in all of cannabis. And to be able to partner with her and lead with, Happi and Wana together was just an opportunity we couldn't pass up. So absolutely. Sharing Wana's hemp-derived gummies with our consumer and having two really strong female-founded brands was kind of our vision from a year ago, and we brought it together in two ways. Wana's sold on Happi, and Happi's part of Wanderous.
Absolutely. I don't think people stop and realize just how impressive the Wana and Nancy exit actually was. It's historic, and that's a huge feather in the cap. So to have you two partner up on, products that complement one another so well was refreshing to see. So I did want to just highlight that and then just ask on, what's that like for a brand? Because you're right, the unit economics get tricky if there's not enough eyeballs and impressions to help facilitate all these kind of net new customers. But I'm very curious to see how that all that shakes out.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of gummies, again, we surveyed our consumer. It's tricky because gummies have been around for a lot longer in dispensaries. So there are quite a bit of, even Happi's current consumers are like, we're really happy getting gummies in dispensaries, but we buy our drinks from you. And I think that is more surprising to us than maybe we thought. I think we believed our Happi consumer early on was just canna curious. They had never tried cannabis or were not regular users, and what we're finding is they maybe love their gummies and love Wana, their 10 milligram Wanas from the dispensary, but they want a 5 milligram Happi, or they want to order Happi on the site. So our Wana gummies that we sell are 5 milligrams. Wana's hemp derived gummies on Wanderous are also 5 milligrams, and so I think for those consumers that are a little more experienced, some of them are more comfortable buying gummies in dispensaries.
I also want to make a comment about Nancy and Wana as well. I think last time we spoke, I told you I'm a big fan of both Juana as well as everything Nancy has done as well. And then I'm also a big fan of their gummies. So just wanted to kind of echo David there. With hemp companies technically having the option to pursue, an IPO and everything like that, what does a dream outcome look like for Happi, call it 5 or 10 years from now?
A dream outcome is you open every one of our fridges, and instead of beer and seltzers and all that, you see a Happi there. It's just part of, and there's one for, your morning, your afternoon, and your evening. I think it's going to be really interesting, Lars, in 2025. I think we've got a lot of stuff going on. It has to be the year the Farm Bill gets decided, right? They've kicked it now for 2 years. I think we have a new administration that's a complete wild card in place. We don't know where things are going to go or how they're going to go. So I think a dream outcome for Happi is a really strong strategic partner in the alcohol beverage universe somewhere. Doesn't necessarily need to be an alcohol company, but somebody that's able to help facilitate speed and scale. I think that's where we win. I think that's where hemp beverage companies can win, because they're not held back like regulated cannabis is. You have the ability to scale. The challenge is distributors that have scale, not just single state distributors, but distributors across multiple states, really jumping in, larger alcohol companies really jumping in. So I think, 10 to 15 years, I think we'd like to be part of a larger beverage company with distribution certainly in all, 50 states, and really just thriving the way I think, take a High Noon, for example. The way they changed the seltzer market. I think obviously White Claw was the first, but I think Noon came in with a really strong brand and some great flavors. And I think I'd like to see Happi be in the same.
Yeah. Is there any ideal partner that you have in mind already, or anything like that? Like, is it an AB partner, or Multi-Coors, or someone more like a PepsiCo or Coke on the non-adult beverage side?
Really open. And I think what's kind of cool and exciting in this category too is distributors are also not conflicted out, whereas they are in alcohol. So I think there's I think some of the MSOs are starting to do some smart moves. I think tobacco's coming in. So I see this category as we want to work with awesome people, and we want to have a partner that's going to provide not only growth capital, but also a growth catalyst in terms of resources, in terms of distribution, and in terms of really, really understanding the beverage space. So we're just looking for a strong partner, and could come from a lot of different places that again can help with scale and rapid growth.
Follow up there on that is, you have someone like Tilray, which obviously started as only cannabis, but has now evolved into this massive beverage company, not just cannabis beverages, but beverages in general. Is that potentially a route you guys would want to go? And if you had the right financial partner to kind of acquire additional brands, or do you really just want to stay focused on the wellness and health aspect with Happi?
So what I will tell you is we're open to, we're a beverage company through and through. We will not do other forms. So some of our, my other HBA board members and other US Hemp Roundtable, beverage committee members, they sell smokable flower, smokable hemp flower. They sell hemp vapes. They sell hemp gummies. Happi's a beverage company through and through. We want to have a beverage for every occasion. How we get distributed or who we partner with, I think still open. I think watching what Tilray's done is fascinating. I think watching what GTI is doing with Agrify and Senorita is super interesting. I think watching what some of the bigger distributors that are now getting in the game are starting to do, like a Johnson Brothers is coming in, others that have multi-state, they're not just a single state distributor, is really exciting. I wouldn't be surprised if retailers start taking equity stakes in brands for private label as house brands. This is where, back to David's really interesting question earlier around CPG versus regulated, this is where it starts to lean much more CPG, because you can, technically top 10, and John Halper, who I think he's at MJ Biz this week, and I love that he's so passionate about this category. I could see them wanting a house brand, right? I mean, a private label brand, and that is straight out of the CPG playbook. I mean, that is not obviously regulated cannabis. So I think 2025 is going to be a big year, and we're going to see a lot of different business models. We already are. And I think we're going to see brands start to become parts of those business models in unique ways.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure getting to learn more about not only your journey, but what you're building with Happi.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. And for all your followers, you can put this in the notes, but Happi FF20 is our friends and family code on D2C. So for all your listeners, we'd love to share that. And happyhourdrink.com. And thank you, Lars. And thanks, David. It was really fun to talk to you guys. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel where you can watch all of our episodes and more exclusive content. Your support helps us continue sharing these inspiring stories from the functional and THC beverage industries. Until next time, guys, cheers.